Yes, thank you, Mr Deputy President. Today the Senate is being presented with a bill that provides for 3 new ways by which a person who is a dual national can cease to be a citizen of our country. This is a reactionary bill that seeks to provide the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection with the power to, in effect, remove Australian citizenship from dual nationals if they meet the criteria established in this legislation. The Greens believe that stripping citizenship, I'll say that again, the Greens believe that citizenship is too precious a gift and confers too many important rights to be effectively stripped at the whim of a government or at the whim of a minister. We believe that this legislation runs counter to the rule of law, implies a lack of confidence in Australia's judicial system and does not provide natural justice to potentially impacted Australian citizens. It's worth pointing out that this is a Tony Abbott-era bill being continued by the Turnbull government, as have so many other policy settings such as emissions reduction targets, fossil fuel subsidies and the detention of women and children seeking asylum. This legislation owes far more to the government's desire to be seen to be doing something to respond to the domestic and international challenges of violent extremism than it does to a genuine desire to make Australia and Australians safer at home and overseas. In fact, it is strongly arguable that this legislation allows for the minister to make the world, and therefore Australia and Australians, less safe. The Greens believe that the best place for Australian citizens who are violent extremists is in custody here in Australia. We have a duty to people from other nations and to our loved ones living and travelling overseas to ensure that any of our citizens who commit acts of violent extremism are dealt with by the justice system here in Australia. They should be charged, convicted and locked up in secure Australian prisons where they can do no further harm. This can already be achieved under existing provisions of the Criminal Code Act 1995, including Divisions 101 and 117. Amendments to the Foreign Evidence Act 1994, made in 2014, made it easier to obtain admissible evidence in regions in severe states of conflict where there is no functioning government or where the legitimacy of the government is not recognised by Australia. This makes successful prosecutions more likely. If this bill passes, Australia will be able to effectively export people labelled as terrorists to other countries less able to contain the threat that they pose. Export violent extremists into a global marketplace of the displaced, the disenfranchised, the radicalised and the violent. This would make the world a less safe place for all of its citizens, including Australians. It should be self-evident that we cannot make Australia safer by making other countries more dangerous, but that is exactly what this law provides for. Violent extremism does not respect or distinguish between national borders, and if there is one lesson we've learned from the tragic events in Paris, Beirut and Bamako, it is that making the world safer from violent extremism requires a high level of international cooperation. This bill is the antithesis of that and a prime example of Abbott-era unilateralism and the kind of machismo which Prime Minister Turnbull has committed to end. Washing our hands of responsibility for Australian citizens who are violent extremists is grossly irresponsible in a period of what should be heightened international cooperation to meet the challenges of providing safety to our people in an often dangerous world.